Los Angeles is rarely truly cold, but on that December day, the air struck the face with an unexpected sharpness. Elon Musk stepped out of the office building on Sunset Boulevard, slightly lifting the collar of his jacket. His mind was buzzing with thoughts about investor negotiations and the new iteration of the neural network for Optimus. He was walking towards his car, a black Cybertruck parked across the street, when something made him stop. On the corner by a newspaper stand sat a man. He was wearing a tattered puffer jacket, worn-out sneakers, and a baseball cap pulled low over his eyes. In front of him was a cardboard sign with the words, "Former engineer, lost everything, need food and work, not money a chance." Elon was about to walk past, but his gaze lingered. The features of the man's face were unclear under the dirt and exhaustion, but something in his posture, the way he held his hands, seemed familiar. "Charlie?" Elon said softly. The man lifted his eyes. There was something lost, dull in them, but also familiar. "Elon," his voice was hoarse, as if it hadn't been used in a long time. They silently stared at each other for a few seconds. Then Musk walked closer and extended his hand. "Get up. Let's go have a coffee. Are you sure you want that?" Charlie said with a sad smile, "I don't think I fit the dress code for Starbucks." "Don't care," Elon replied shortly. They sat in a corner of the cafe. Charlie drank black coffee, warming his hands on the cup. His gaze flickered across the table as if he couldn't focus. "Talk," Musk said. "I'm not leaving until I understand how you ended up on the street. After I left Tesla, I didn't know right away what I wanted to do," Charlie began. "But the idea was in the air, to create something that would merge medicine and AI. Trent Caldwell and I founded a company called Helix Mind. I was responsible for the technology, and he handled the money and connections." Elon nodded. He remembered Trent, charismatic, a little theatrical, but at first glance, a smart guy. "We developed software for clinics, an algorithm that predicts the recurrence of depression and anxiety disorders based on a patient's digital footprint. It wasn't magic, just a lot of data, behavioral analytics, sleep monitoring, speech patterns, real science." "And what went wrong?" Elon asked. Charlie smiled, without joy. "Money, as always. We raised $80 million in 2 rounds. We started growing fast, and then it began. Unexplained payments to third-party companies, increasing marketing expenses no one could see. I started asking questions. At first, they gently hinted, 'Not your responsibility, Charlie.' Then it got harsher. He looked away, pressing his lips together. At some point, the accountant accidentally or maybe intentionally sent me a file. There were payments. The same company, Harbor Reach Solutions, was getting tens of thousands monthly. I checked. It was registered in Delaware, the owner was a front, and the address was a small office where no one answered. "Did you tell anyone about this?" Elon asked. "Yeah, right to Trent." 3 days later, I was called to a board meeting. They accused me of inefficient management. They voted to fire me. No access to the server, email, or anything. I filed a lawsuit. They countered with a lawsuit for exceeding authority and disclosing confidential information. "Checkmate," Elon said grimly. "I spent all my savings on lawyers. Then I had to sell my house." The divorce happened almost simultaneously. My daughter stayed with her mother, and I was left with nothing. He paused, as though swallowing an invisible bone. Then everything sped up. At first, I slept at a friend's place. Then, in a motel. Then in the car. Then the bank took the car. I tried to get a job anywhere, but there were tons of articles about me on the internet. engineer involved in embezzling startup funds. No one would hire me, not even as a mover. At some point, I just stopped. I gave up fighting. Elon watched him in silence. Everything about this story sounded too real. "Charlie," he said slowly, "if you want, I'll help you dig this to the end, not out of pity, but because this story stinks. And I want to know who the real criminal is." Charlie nodded. Not immediately, but his gaze became a bit steadier. "Okay, just know this. It's not just a dirty story, it's a swamp. And I still don't know who was really pulling the strings." That same evening, Elon drove Charlie to his mansion in Bel Air. It wasn't an act of salvation, but a cold, practical decision. A place where Charlie could speak safely. Elon wasn't looking to stir up the past out of pity. He had a different motive, the truth. They sat on the veranda with a view of the hills. It was cool, but Charlie refused to go inside. He still felt like he didn't have the right to. "You mentioned Trent Caldwell," Elon said. "Who else was on the board of directors?" Charlie rubbed his temples. "Susan West, former general counsel at Johnson & Johnson. Trent brought her onto the team. She always carried herself like someone who knew more than she said. Never argued, but always voted the way she needed to. Then there was Michael Winter, a representative from a large venture fund. They invested about $30 million. A very cold guy. Old school financier. He seemed like he was just observing, but I'm sure he knew everything. Or at least suspected." Elon began making notes on his phone. "You said the accountant accidentally sent you a file. What about her?" "Here's the strange part," Charlie hesitated. "A month after I was fired, she disappeared. I tried to reach her, but her phone didn't answer. Her email was disconnected. I even tried to find her through mutual acquaintances. No one knew where she was. She just vanished. Her name? Mary Wong. Taiwanese. Very meticulous. She's the one who once told me, 'Charlie, the numbers don't lie. Only people make them lie.' I'll remember that," Elon replied briefly. He fell silent for a moment. His brain was working with its characteristic speed. The case reminded him of an old industrial conflict. Everything looked clean on the outside, but inside there was mold. "You mentioned the company Harbor Reach Solutions. Are you sure it's a shell company?" 95% sure. "I filed an official request during the conflict and got a vague response with the stamp of some offshore law firm. There was no director, no employees, just an address and a tax ID number. Everything else empty. And they provided legal consulting for us at $400 per quarter. Classic scheme. The money gets funneled through fronts, so it can be later legalized in private expenses. And Trent? Trent isn't stupid. He didn't do anything in his own name. All transactions went through legal entities that didn't interact directly with him. But," Charlie lowered his voice, "I once overheard a call. He was talking to someone and mentioned, 'Tell Carter to make the bill like Bardin's.' I didn't know who Carter was or what Bardin's was then, but now I think it's a lead." "We'll find it," Elon said firmly. He stood up and walked over to the railing. Below, the city lights twinkled. Los Angeles was beautiful, even when it was decaying. "I'll call my people," he continued. "You'll tell them everything, in detail. We'll go through the transactions, structures, company chains. If this is corporate fraud, we'll bring it to light. And if it's more than just fraud, all the more interesting," Elon said. "I have people who know how to read between the lines. Especially when those lines are bank statements." For the first time in a long while, Charlie genuinely smiled. "I forgot what it's like when someone believes in you." Elon replied almost in a whisper, It's not about belief, Charlie, it's about the facts. They were sitting in the kitchen. It was already past midnight, but neither Elon nor Charlie was in a hurry to go to bed. On the table was simple food, scrambled eggs, bread, water. Charlie ate slowly, but not out of manners. He had long since gotten used to eating irregularly. "When's the last time you slept in a bed?" Elon asked. "November." Charlie glanced out the window. "At a shelter in Pico Union. The beds are metal, and there's one blanket for 3 people. A guy in the bed next to me kept talking in his sleep about bullets. I didn't get any rest." Elon silently poured him more water. "You know, the strangest thing," Charlie continued, "I thought I'd break from hunger, or the cold, or because no one recognizes me. But that's not the worst part. The worst part is, you start doubting whether you were ever anyone at all. Like that Charlie, the engineer, the father, the partner, was just a made-up person. An illusion that they took away from you." He ran his hand over his face, as though trying to wipe the thought away. "I tried to get back to normal, really tried. I went to McDonald's, Home Depot, even an Amazon warehouse, but everywhere they wanted a resume. And my name in every damn search is next to fraud, investigation, scandal, and no one listens to explanations. People don't care that you're not guilty if Google says you are. Did you reach out to your daughter?" Elon asked cautiously. "Only through her mother. Alice is married now to some lawyer from Palo Alto." "I don't blame her. She had to save the kid from the collapse. From me." He lowered his gaze. "I wrote letters. One for Christmas, one for her birthday. I don't know if they got there." No reply. Silence fell, deep, like concrete. Elon watched the ice slowly melt in his glass. Charlie didn't eat anymore. "I've lost everything, Elon. Not money. That can be earned back. I lost the sense that I'm someone, that I even exist. When you're on the street, you're like a shadow. Hundreds of people pass by you every day, and no one looks you in the eye. People are afraid of homeless people, not because we're dangerous, but because we remind them that it could happen to anyone." He stood up, walked to the window, and looked at the night city. "Sometimes I sat at a bus stop on Santa Monica and watched the buses come in. People got on with backpacks, in suits, with kids. They were going somewhere, and I wasn't. I was just sitting there, like a glitch in the system." Elon was silent for a long time. Then he said, "You're not outside the system anymore, Charlie. Tomorrow morning a shower, normal clothes, breakfast. Then we'll sit down and put everything back together piece by piece. But I need you whole. And if necessary, I'll hire a therapist, a personal lawyer, and a damn PR agency to scrub all that nonsense about you off the internet. Why are you doing this?" Charlie turned to him. "You could have just walked past." Elon stood up, poured himself some water. "Because if the world devoured you for nothing, then tomorrow it could devour anyone. And I don't like it when the system is used as a weapon." He drank and added, "And because once you helped me finish the autopilot for the Moon DOS on the 3rd day without sleep. I remember you said, 'Elon, if we fall together. Looks like it's time to keep my word.'" Charlie didn't answer. He just slowly sat back down and closed his eyes. Not from exhaustion, but from relief. The next morning, the house in Bel Air woke up with the dawn. The automatic blinds gently rose, letting in the pale morning light. Charlie woke up on the couch in one of the guest rooms, wrapped in a clean, fresh blanket. At first, he didn't understand where he was. The white walls, the smell of coffee, the silence, the softness of the fabric, it all felt too distant from the reality of the last few months. He sat up and ran his hand over his face. No stubble, no dust, no cold. The bathroom was just across the hall with marble floors, a glass shower, and towels rolled up perfectly, like in a hotel. Charlie stood before the mirror and didn't recognize himself. Hollow cheeks, grey hair, eyes that seemed to have winter stuck in them. He exhaled, turned on the water, and stepped under the warm stream. Meanwhile, in the kitchen, Elon did something he rarely allowed himself. He made scrambled eggs. He didn't like delegating the simplest things if they mattered. It was part of his philosophy. He believed that gestures were more important than words. When Charlie appeared shaved, in a fresh t-shirt and pants picked out by Elon's assistants from the guest wardrobe, Elon looked up and gave a short nod. "Better?" "Much better," Charlie answered, sitting down at the table. "Today we have a simple plan. Food, clothes, and then you tell everything in your own voice to my team. Not a retelling, not guesses you. Everything as it was. Are you sure you want your people involved in this?" "Charlie," Elon smirked, "I have people who once hacked banking systems in Singapore and documented corruption in military contracts. Trust me, you're not the most dangerous case." After breakfast, they went out through the backyard, where a Tesla Model X was already waiting. The car was driven by one of Elon's security guards, Joe, a former employee of Boeing's internal security department, now responsible for Elon's physical security. He didn't ask questions, just nodded when Charlie sat next to him. "First Beverly Center. There, you'll pick out normal clothes. No suits, just everything you need to feel human again. Do you have a contract with Beverly Center?" Charlie chuckled. "No, they just have good coffee." Elon shrugged. "They spent nearly 2 hours at the mall." Charlie initially stood awkwardly at the entrance to the store, as though afraid he'd be kicked out. Then, little by little, he relaxed. He tried on jeans, t-shirts, a light jacket. He looked at himself in the mirror and froze for a second. "I almost forgot what it's like to look like a normal person," he muttered. "No, you look like a person who has a story," Elon replied. "And now we're going to start writing it again." Later, in the house's meeting room, 3 people were already waiting. Lucy Vander, a corporate audit specialist, Greg Tanner, a former SEC investigator, and Rob Santos, an IT specialist with a couple of years of experience at DARPA. Charlie was silent at first, but under Lucy's confident and calm gaze, he began to speak, at first chronologically, then with details. Greg wrote it all down without interrupting. Rob was already feeding names and companies into his laptop. When the story came to the transactions and the disappearance of the accountant Mary Wong, Lucy raised her head for the first time. "You said the last correspondence with her was in December 2023. "Yes." "Then let's start with her. If she didn't disappear intentionally, someone removed her from the picture. There are only 3 reasons: fear, money, or pressure." Elon stood up and walked around the table. "We need to piece together the whole picture: financial flows, Trent's connections, Harbor Reach's registration, and figure out who was hiding behind this Carter you overheard. We have resources. And we have you." He looked at Charlie with a short, heavy confidence. "If you're ready, we'll break this down to the bone." And at that moment, something changed in Charlie's face. He was once again an engineer, not a victim. His voice gained firmness. "I'm ready." In the spacious conference room, where engineering prototypes and satellite launches were once discussed, there was now only silence, interrupted by the clicking of keyboards. On the long table lay printouts, bank statements, copies of corporate documents, emails, screenshots of conversations from Charlie's leaked archive, which he had saved on an old USB drive. Elon Musk's team was joined by two more people, Abigail Stone, an offshore structures analyst who had worked with the Pandora Papers, and Mark Reed, a digital forensic specialist. Former FBI cyber investigator, now a person capable of finding a connection between any LLC and any trust, even if separated by 3 continents. "We're proceeding quietly," Elon said. "This isn't a mission of punishment. This is a mission to establish the truth. Everything has to be solid documents, data, connections, motives. No assumptions, no emotions." "Understood," replied Abigail. "The first thing that stands out, Harbor Reach Solutions is registered in Delaware, but managed from the Virgin Islands. It's registered to the umbrella company Blackdoor Holdings, which in turn is under a Cypriot trust. Very sophisticated structure. You don't set something like that up for petty fraud." "Who signed the agreements?" Elon asked. "No direct signatures. All power of attorney from Harbor. But here's something interesting. One of these attorneys, Robert Lang, appeared in a 2016 fraud case against Pacific Horizons. There were fake contracts and capital siphoning there too." "And Carter?" Charlie, who had been sitting aside, listening as his past was being broken down piece by piece, asked. "Found him," said Mark, not looking away from the screen. "Carter is Carter Mills, a former financial consultant. He's living in Austin now. We've got records that he was in talks with Harbor in 2022. Here's an email from the server of an old subcontractor. The topic is realizing underperforming assets. Judging by the text, they were discussing how to create the appearance of losses on the balance sheet." Elon exhaled slowly. "So they first handed out money and then faked the losses?" "Yes. The money went to services that no one actually provided. And these services were supposedly written off as unsuccessful legal consultations, marketing, and even media analysis. And all of it was approved by Trent," Charlie said calmly, but his voice tightened, like a string. "He personally signed off on everything." "We only have indirect connections," Lucy replied. "But if we find any direct indication from him, like an email, a voicemail, a signature, then it's a criminal case." "Can we check who actually paid for Harbor's services?" Elon asked. "We're already working on it," Abigail said. "There's suspicion that the money passed through 3 accounts before reaching the offshore. If it turns out that the ultimate beneficiary is someone from the board of directors, that will be direct proof of conspiracy. And the accountant, Mary Wong." Elon turned to Rob. "Here's where it gets strange. She seems to be alive. I tracked activity on her old LinkedIn account she logged in just a week ago, but not from Los Angeles, from," he paused. "Zurich, Switzerland?" Elon asked. "Yes, I'll check with my contacts. It's possible she left under pressure, or received an offer she couldn't refuse." "What are we going to do?" Lucy asked. Elon slowly walked around the room. "We're doing 3 things. First, we confirm the offshore chain. Second, we look for any communication between Trent and Carter. Third, we find Mary Wong and try to talk to her." "And what if she doesn't want to talk?" Charlie asked. Elon stopped. "We'll offer her something Trent can't a chance to clear her name, yours, hers, and possibly even my own." A silence followed. There were no heroes in the room, only people who decided to finish what others had considered hopeless. After a long day filled with spreadsheets, transfer schemes, and hypotheses about offshore company beneficiaries, Elon and Charlie sat on the terrace. The yellow evening sky hung over the Santa Monica Mountains. The air was warm, but not stuffy. Elon poured himself a glass of wine while Charlie chose tea. He still couldn't allow himself pleasures he didn't consider necessary. "Your team is just Charlie shook his head. I didn't know this was even possible. The thoroughness, the speed. I thought you only kept geniuses for rockets and electric cars. Now I keep them for the truth, Elon replied. Sometimes they're compatible. He took a sip of wine and added, I've asked you about Mary, about Carter, about the scheme. But I still haven't asked, who did you lose in your personal life? Not in business, in real life. Charlie remained silent for a long time. His gaze dropped to the far slope of the hill, where the lights of other people's homes flickered below. I lost Lisa, he said quietly. My daughter. Elon looked at him, not interrupting. She's 13 now. I remember the first day of school when she came back in tears. Someone called her a stranger because of her last name. I sat on the kitchen floor with her and explained that being a stranger isn't bad. It means you're special, and if people are afraid of your difference, it means you have something they don't. He ran his hand over his face. His fingers trembled, and then the trial started. The press. Headlines. CFO accused of embezzlement. We didn't know it was all set up. Alice, my ex-wife, couldn't take the pressure. She took Lisa to her sister's in Palo Alto. Then she filed for a restraining order. At first, it was temporary. Then the judge made it permanent, citing destructive social environment. Did you fight it? I tried. But when you're living in a shelter, and your lawyer is a student from a law clinic, and hers is from a firm in San Francisco, you don't stand a chance, Elon. They didn't even listen. They just crossed me off. Elon clenched his hand on the armrest of his chair. Now you know who's guilty. We're almost at the heart of it. Once we prove it, you can file for a reconsideration. I know. Charlie nodded slightly. But you know what the worst part is? It's not that I lost access to my child. It's that she no longer knows who I am. In her life, I'm just a frightening article on the internet. I'm the person they protected her from. She probably thinks I betrayed everyone. He fell silent, his hands clenched into fists. When I once saw her photo on social media, with her new stepdad, she was smiling. The same smile as when she was a child, only it wasn't for me. I was shut out of her life, like a lamp someone unplugged. There was silence on the terrace. A helicopter flew by in the distance. The wind brought the scent of flowers from the lower garden. Elon stood up, walked closer, and placed a hand on his shoulder. We can't turn back time, but we can restore the truth. If she learns that you didn't disappear but fought, fell, survived, that will no longer be a myth. It will be an example. Charlie exhaled slowly. You know, at one point I was standing at the station next to a trash can, eating the remains of a burger from a bag, and I caught the gaze of a woman with a child. She quickly looked away. But I understood. If Lisa saw me in that state, she wouldn't recognize me, not by appearance and not by essence. He turned to Elon. You gave me a chance to recover. And if you help me restore my name, I will do everything to restore my face. Elon nodded. This isn't about gratitude, Charlie. This is about justice. Your story is not rare. It's just that most don't meet a team willing to dig until the end. He finished his wine and said, And we'll dig deep. Tomorrow we have a meeting with Trent, Elon said, closing his laptop and standing up from the table. And that means you need to look not like a victim, but like a person who got up after the hardest blow. Charlie smirked, but there was worry in his eyes. Do I not look that way? Not yet. But you will. Elon clapped his hands, and within a couple of minutes, his personal assistant appeared with car keys. Get dressed. We're heading downtown. Today you're picking the suit you'll wear when you look into the eyes of the person who destroyed your life. The store wasn't just a store. It was a private client room in one of the elite boutiques on Rodeo Drive, where people with money and a story come. This is not a place to just look. You're greeted by appointment, offered almond milk, coffee, and dressed as though you're about to testify before Congress. At first, Charlie felt uncomfortable. He thought he didn't deserve the silk lining or the perfectly fitted shoulders. He looked at the price tags, calculating how many nights he could have spent in a shelter for the price of a single blazer. "Relax," Elon said. "This isn't a gift. It's a tool. The suit, the tie, the shoes, this isn't fashion. It's armor. And you put it on to go into battle." Charlie sighed and stepped into the fitting room. 20 minutes later, he emerged in a grey suit with a subtle texture, a white shirt, and a burgundy tie. Elon looked him up and down, like an engineer evaluating the final prototype. Better, just a little more confidence. But that will come. The salesman silently stepped away, leaving the men alone. Charlie approached the mirror and looked at himself. "You know," he started quietly, "I haven't worn a suit since I left the courthouse. That's when everything fell apart. My reputation, my job, my life. In the same suit. Now it's associated with shame." "Then burn it," Elon said calmly. "Today, you wear a new one, the one in which you don't fall, the one in which you rise." Later, they stopped by a barbershop, the real deal, with that same leather chair, hot towels, and razors straight out of old movies. The barber was silent, precise, and fast. 40 minutes later, Charlie was looking at a different person in the mirror. A neat, short haircut, a groomed beard, a clear gaze. "Now, this is no longer the bum from the platform," he said, turning to Elon. "This is a person whose future was stolen. And who's come to take it back?" "Perfect," Elon said. "Because tomorrow you'll have to remind Trent that you weren't weak. You were loyal." And he was afraid of strength. They returned home late in the evening. On the porch, a new batch of prints was waiting for them, the latest set of data sent by Abigail. But before they started going through it, Charlie paused in front of the mirror in the hallway. He looked at his reflection and for the first time in a long time didn't look away. "Thank you," he said, not looking at Elon, "for not just giving me a place. You gave me a face. And now we'll give you the truth," Elon quietly replied. The morning at Elon's house didn't start with coffee, but with flip charts and document analysis. Lucy was already sitting on the couch with a tablet. Mark had joined via video call from the Houston office, and on the table lay a large white map with the inscription, "Harbor Reach." Full schema. Charlie stood at the board in the new shirt they had picked out for him at the boutique the day before. He held a marker and, like during the old meetings at JetLink, carefully described the chains through which money had flowed out of their company. He spoke with concentration and clarity, like a person who had been silent for too long and was finally given the right to be heard. It all started with this consulting agreement. He wrote a rectangle and signed it. Consulting contract, $840K. We were expanding our international division at the time. Trent said we needed a strategy to enter the East Asian market. And Harbor Reach offered analytics and brand positioning. "Who initiated the contact?" asked Lucy. "Formally Carter, but he just passed it along." It felt like the decision was already made before the discussion. Trent signed the very next day. "Did you check out Harbor?" "Yes, at the database level." The company was registered, with an EIN number, a website with basic information, even one case with reviews. Everything seemed decent. But he snapped his fingers and pulled out an old file from a flash drive. I saved their first report. Take a look. It's just a rephrased Wikipedia entry. No market research, no metrics. Lucy quickly scanned the document and just grunted. Even a student could have done it better. Exactly. I raised the issue, but Trent said it was just phase 1, and the key thing was the connections they'd provide. And then, he pulled a piece of paper from his personal notebook. Harbour had an internal representative, someone LD. This was the signature on several letters. It sounded odd, but I couldn't figure out who it was. Then everything went downhill. Harbour was getting paid, then hiring subcontractors also offshore. With each layer, more and more sense disappeared. But I never saw any of these contracts myself. Trent signed everything. Elon handed him a bottle of water. Charlie drank and continued. Then came the internal debts, meaning we were sort of borrowing money from our own structure in Ireland, which we had financed ourselves. Formally investments. In reality, money was being siphoned off. What about the accountant, Mary? At first, she checked everything. We were looking for discrepancies together. But after one board meeting, she seemed to change. She became closed off. One day I found her in the conference room, crying, saying she didn't want to get involved. 2 weeks later, termination, no severance. That's when I realized someone must have intimidated her. But I couldn't prove anything. Mark nodded from the video call. That's confirmed. Mary's termination was a week before the 1.2 million transfer to an account in Luxembourg, which is connected to the umbrella company under Trent. And here's something else. Charlie said, I've kept this note all this time. He unfolded a paper with handwritten words. Al D. Orkel's Lawrence DeWitt? I saw the name Lawrence DeWitt in one of the cover letters. It flashed in a footnote. Then it disappeared. I checked him out back then, found nothing. But the name stayed in my head. Elon took the paper. Lawrence DeWitt. Mark? Already searching, came the sound of typing. Got it. He's a former managing partner at Bridgewater Advanced Advisory. Left in 2020. After that, private consultant for financial strategies. Now lives in the Bahamas, connected to the very same Black Door holdings through the trust Coraline Trust. Elon looked at Charlie. You just gave us the missing link. LD is the bridge between Harbour and Trent. Lucy looked up from her tablet. If Lawrence DeWitt acted as a grey cardinal, and we have a letter in which he's mentioned we're close to direct evidence of a conspiracy. I knew this wasn't just a mistake, Charlie said. But proving it alone, impossible. But now, you're not alone. Elon said firmly, You're not alone, Charlie. Outside, the rain had started to drizzle, but inside the house, it was only getting hotter. The analysts were piecing together the details, forming a mosaic like investigators, not chasing a sensation, but yearning for the truth. And at the center of it all stood the man who had once been left on the sidelines, the one who, now for the first time in many years, was standing tall once again. That evening, after Charlie revealed the details of the Harbour Reach scheme to Elon and his team, they dived into their work. Lucy, Mark, and the other members of Elon's team began systematically going through every detail, every document, and every letter to find a mistake, an omission, or an oddity. They didn't believe in coincidences. Charlie sat in the corner of the room, still somewhat down, but determined. His eyes were tired, but there was an energy in them that he hadn't felt in a long time. This was the first time he had seen people who could truly help. Elon wasn't letting them sleep, not out of harshness, but because he knew they were on the verge of something grand. Look at this. Lucy handed Elon an open folder. On it was a sketch of a flowchart showing money leaving through an offshore account. "This can't be a coincidence," Mark said, not lifting his eyes from the screen. "Look, we found another strange transaction. A 500 transfer made 3 days before the bankruptcy. The deal was executed through a company connected to one of Trent's relatives." Elon approached the computer and studied the information closely. This is clearly not just a transfer. There's a scheme within a scheme. This money was supposed to end up in another account to justify unpaid debts. He created the illusion of financial stability and then just tangled everyone up. Charlie, still focused on his tablet, was following the process. He couldn't believe it was so close. Almost like a puzzle where the last piece was missing for everything to fall into place. "You see," Elon said, "they used your resources, your money, to build a system that made them untouchable. Trent and this DeWitt, they're like two architects. But your work and your ideas were just the foundation stones that they could change at will. In their eyes, you weren't a partner. You were just part of the contract." Charlie nodded. He knew it was true, but the realization that he had been a tool in someone else's game was painful. All these years he thought he was building his career. In reality, they had used him as a pawn in their global financial game. "We need to contact the lawyers," Lucy said. "But before we start preparing the lawsuit, let's gather all the evidence. The more we have, the easier it will be to work with the court and the media. We need to be ready for public pressure." Elon nodded. "That's the point. We need to expose them, not just win in court. We need to make sure they can't escape responsibility. Right here, right now. We'll reveal all their moves and show how this scheme worked." By force. Charlie stood up and approached the board. He added a new element to the chart, linking the newly discovered facts to a series of transfers. His face became focused again, just like in the old days when he managed projects. "Look here, this is the last stage. After Trent and his partners began manipulating the balances, everything started to decline. Trent gave the final order to transfer funds to offshore accounts, and after that, the crisis hit. These funds, in essence, didn't belong to them. They deceived their investors by directing finances into an empty shell, and then funneled them into private companies." Elon looked at Charlie. His eyes became steely, and his voice more resolute. "You're right. This looks like a well-thought-out operation. But now we know they won't escape responsibility. We're at the finish line. We just need to prove it in court, and Trent and his friends won't be able to avoid punishment." After several hours of work, Elon's team had gathered all the necessary documents. Lucy sent them to the central office, and Mark prepared a presentation for the meeting with the lawyers. All the information was processed. Charlie felt a sense of relief, but there was still some unfinished business. Elon noticed this. "You probably didn't think it would end just like that," he said. "No," Charlie replied. "But now I know there's a chance. That's the most important thing for me." Elon didn't add anything else. They both understood that the end had not come yet. This process would take time, and whatever happened, Charlie had now become a part of a bigger game. When the day of the meeting arrived, the tension in the air was almost palpable. Charlie sat across from Elon, looking more composed than in previous days, although his hands still trembled slightly. The room was silent, as if it were the calm before the storm. Elon stood by the window, gazing at the skyscrapers slipping beyond the horizon. After a minute, he turned to Charlie and, with a casual gesture, indicated the chair opposite him. "He'll be here in an hour. Are you ready?" Charlie nodded but couldn't hide the nervousness in his eyes. He knew that this meeting would be pivotal. After all these years of being spit on and destroyed by financial manipulations, He was about to meet the person responsible for ruining his life. "You don't have to do this," Elon continued. "You can just sit here and observe. We're ready to fight without you, if you don't want." To look this man in the eye, Charlie leaned back in his chair and thought for a moment. Then, with restraint, he said, "No, I need to see this. Not just to believe they're all guilty. I want to look him in the eyes when he realizes that I'm alive, that I've come to take what's mine." Elon, understanding that this moment was important for his friend, walked over to the table and laid out the documents. He was focused, as always, but there was a hint of anxiety in his eyes. Trent wasn't just the man who had destroyed Charlie's business. He had known Elon back from the days when he was starting his career. In some ways, this was also his personal matter. 45 minutes later, the door opened, and in walked the man. Lawrence DeWitt, tall, with a characteristic stern expression and a slow, confident stride. He was the embodiment of calmness, even arrogance, like someone who had always been at the center of events and knew how to manipulate those around him. His suit was impeccable, and his eyes concealed not only hidden strength, but perhaps something darker. Upon entering the room, he immediately looked at Elon and Charlie. "I take it we're having a conversation today," said DeWitt, his voice steady, with no hint of guilt or discomfort. Elon's expression remained unchanged. He approached the table and, without breaking his gaze from DeWitt, silently placed a folder with documents in front of him. "All the documents are on the table, Lawrence," Elon said calmly. "You know what this is?" DeWitt raised an eyebrow slightly, but didn't rush to respond. He simply looked at Charlie, who sat in the chair opposite, seemingly holding back every impulse, every glance. "Charlie, I suppose you thought I'd forgotten about you. But, honestly, you don't interest me," Lawrence said, sitting down and adjusting his suit. "You were a convenient pawn in a big game. We all make our moves. You lost, and now you're sitting here, trying to prove something." There was no apology, no regret in his words. He spoke like someone who believed he was in the right. Charlie lifted his head, unable to hold back any longer. "You think you can just talk like that? You destroyed my ideas, my work, my future. You used me, Lawrence." His voice quivered, but he held himself back, not letting his emotions take over. Lawrence slowly turned to Elon as if ignoring everything else happening in the room. He shrugged lightly. "Personally, I'm not sure you understand who you're dealing with, Elon," he said with mild disdain. "It's not my fault that Charlie couldn't guess who he was making deals with. Everything was planned. I did my part. He was supposed to do his. But life doesn't always give everyone a chance." Charlie clenched his fists, his face reddened with rage, but Elon, maintaining his composure, intervened. "Lawrence, you want to talk about chances? Let's discuss how you manipulated millions. You didn't just take money, you took someone's life. But I'm here to stop this. Now you'll get your chance to talk to us." For real, the silence in the room grew thick. Lawrence felt his confidence start to crack, but he tried to keep his face neutral. Elon, however, seemed ready for this. "Trent's out of the game. You didn't think you could keep manipulating people forever without leaving traces. And here they are, the traces. And now, you'll answer. We've started gathering evidence, Lawrence. And the court, which you've so easily ignored, is coming for you. This isn't just Charlie's finale. It's yours." Lawrence fell silent, his lips trembling for a moment, but he quickly regained control. "You think this will end here, Elon? You don't understand. I always knew this moment would come. But I'm not alone in this game. You and your team, no matter how hard you try, won't be able to get back everything I've already taken." Elon didn't respond. He simply stood up and walked toward the door, with Charlie following closely behind, feeling that this was not just a meeting with his demon but the beginning of something much bigger. From this day forward, everything would change. When Lawrence DeWitt left the room, Elon and Charlie were left standing in silence. The atmosphere was heavier than ever. Charlie felt that this moment was his last chance to pull his life out of the clutches of the people who had destroyed him. But Elon also seemed to be at the verge of putting the final nail in this matter. "We've figured out every move," Elon said, already leaving the office. "This isn't just an ending, it's the beginning of something bigger. I won't let him get away with it." Charlie, still not fully believing that everything was happening so quickly, followed Elon, feeling his heart beat faster. Now, everything depended on how well they prepared. He was no longer a victim, he was a player, and Elon had become his partner in this game. Soon, they found themselves in a large conference center hall where they were to meet Lawrence and his lawyers. The hall was empty except for a few tall tables, at which two groups sat, Elon and his team on one side and Lawrence and his people on the other. The windows were darkened, and only a few desk lamps emitted dim light. Elon and Charlie sat at the table, ready for what was to come. Lawrence entered with his usual confidence, and his lawyer, a renowned expert in financial schemes, began going through the papers and analyzing their next moves. "Aren't you afraid this could be your defeat, Elon?" Lawrence sneered, trying to show a hint of irony. "You chose your side without thinking. Now, let's see how this will turn out." Elon didn't answer. He simply opened his files and placed them on the table before him. His team had already prepared the evidence, leaving no room for maneuver. Everything was in place. "We found, Lawrence, your scheme with every transaction, every manipulation. You used offshore accounts to hide loans, transfers, and fraudulent deals," Elon said coldly. "But the most important thing is that you destroyed people's lives for your own benefit. You thought you were playing chess, but you forgot that chess players are responsible for their moves." Lawrence glanced at the documents, but there was no fear in his eyes. Instead, he tried to take the initiative again. "Is this it? You came here with these papers and think they'll change anything. You know perfectly well that everything can be easily turned against you. All these schemes, your schemes, not mine. You're trying to accuse me of something we've all done at some point. You play by these rules too." Charlie, sitting next to Elon, couldn't hold back any longer. His face was twisted in a mix of pain and rage, and he jumped to his feet. "You don't have the right to say that," he shouted, pointing his finger at Lawrence. "You can't just ruin people's lives for your own gain. You did this, and now you'll have to answer for it." Lawrence looked at Charlie with surprise, but there was no regret in his eyes. "You ended up in this swamp yourself, Charlie. You chose this road. You knew the risks. You thought you were too clever to fall into a trap, but you were wrong. We all do what we have to. We play by the rules." Elon, without saying a word, stood up sharply. He felt the need to take control of the situation. "Lawrence, you're one of those who believes they can play their game and leave no trace. But I'm going to show you that in real life, things aren't as simple as you're used to. We've figured out your scheme, found the loopholes, and now everything will go to court. You won't escape responsibility." The silence in the room deepened. Elon's gaze was as hard as stone. Lawrence felt his confidence begin to crack despite all his attempts to maintain composure. "I'm not going to fight you anymore," he finally said. "I knew this game could end, but I didn't think you'd go all the way." Elon gave a slight nod. "We won't stop. We'll take this to the end, and you'll be held accountable for everything you've done." The silence hung in the air, and then Lawrence stood up. His face became a little paler, and he realized his game was over. Before leaving the room, he looked at Charlie, and it seemed like something clicked in him. He simply raised his hand in a gesture of farewell and left, knowing his life would now be controlled by those he had tried to manipulate. When the doors closed, Charlie and Elon were left alone in the room. Elon turned to his friend and quietly said, "You did it, Charlie. You got your life back." Charlie didn't answer immediately. He felt the weights that had been on his shoulders for so many years begin to melt away. He knew that things wouldn't be easy from here on, but today he felt free. The strength that Elon had shown had been infectious. "I couldn't have done it without you, Elon," Charlie said, weakly smiling. Elon nodded, and perhaps, at that moment, he understood that sometimes, even the most difficult and darkest moments can lead to something bright if you have the right people by your side.